It does. And so it's interesting you're even putting it that way, because if we look at the law of attraction, that's the belief that one manifests that, belief system that it will occur, imagine it, like attracts like. But with prayer, you're having that same allowing, that gratitude and expectation, and that letting go, but it's believing in a power beyond oneself, which I can attest to. Being in that situation in a hospital, I'd much rather lean and hand that responsibility on than believe it was sort of up to me. I believe we're part of that channel, when the heart is open, the way is clear. And that is the truth. It's with that openness of heart. And you'll feel a prayer that's powerful, and you would have experienced this, Paul. Words that come out, spontaneous words, when you're in that power, when you're in that sacred flow, will literally lift your soul and your spirit. You'll feel like you're floating on air.
Yeah. Totally.
And there's definitely a power in that. And it's felt in heaven. I know it is. And I believe every prayer that we say, even for those as they pass over, is felt in heaven as they arrive. Almost like little bursts of love as they welcome their way.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today my guest is the brilliant Dayna Louise, spiritual medium. Hi Dayna, welcome to the show.
Hi Paul and everyone listening, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you all.
And the time zone as well, because you're based in Australia. Whereabouts in Australia?
I am. I'm actually in central New South Wales. So it's actually inland from Sydney, a few hours inland from Sydney, in a lovely place called Dubbo.
Oh, wow. I've never been to Australia, but I must go. It's a beautiful country. So we're not jealous at all, living in the UK where it's mostly rain. But anyway, let's get on with the show, because I'll get country envy at this rate. So, Dayna, thank you for being on. I know we interviewed you quite a few years ago now. God, man, it's gone so quick, hasn't it? But I wanted to dig more deeper into mediumship and about our experiences. And can we touch a little bit on your experience in terms of coming into mediumship? What inspired you? What happened?
Sure. Well, I had very spontaneous, natural experiences growing up as a young girl, where I saw the spirit world and could hear the spirit world. But it really was during the illness of my daughter, Miliana, who is now 19, which is in itself a miracle. At 6 months was diagnosed with AML leukaemia. And so I spent 12 months in Sydney Children's Hospital. And in that time, I witnessed a lot of unexplained happenings, because it's that heightened experience between life and death. And there's some very, very ill children hospitalised that don't get to go home. And unfortunately, we were one of those families that were there for the full duration of that time. There was no going in for treatment and then going home for a few weeks. It really was at the deep end, so to speak. But I mean, even her diagnosis itself, it was something that was, I would have to say, the promptings that I already had that something was severely wrong would not leave me. We can call it mother's intuition, but it did feel a little bit richer than that. Okay. But that led me down the path of questioning why some people heal, why some people are in receipt of miracles, because I do consider my daughter a miracle. I believe it to be true. I witnessed so many things that I can't help but believe in that. But then that led me to question all forms of healing, all belief systems. And from that place, of course, I went on to further train in healing modalities, and the mediumship just strengthened with time. So here I am.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. And I know I've been on the receipt of, on the end of having a very positive experience after having a brain tumor, and they discovered that my tumor had crystallized. And because of this, my whole life changed. Well, what I was going to be and what I became afterwards was completely healed. And that profoundly changed me. So we've kind of got something similar in common to that. But then for me, my experiences started more on the road towards mediumship and healing as well. But can we talk a little bit more about those experiences, the mystical aspect? Even the mystical aspect, it's the wrong way of, it's the wrong word, isn't it? Mystical aspect.
Well, you can almost think was there synchronistic events that happen, and talk, like, what's the chances of that?
Yeah.
But I see it more as divine intervention, because the repetition of these events were so consistent throughout our treatment that I couldn't help. But I knew I was being supported by a spiritual team as such. Those that were, I mean, I was praying incessantly for my daughter's healing. She had a very aggressive form of cancer. In fact, the night that we arrived, I was in a country hospital being told, well, we'll just oversee and keep her overnight. And I said, she won't be here in the morning if we do. Either we go in the ambulance now or I'll drive her myself. And then, of course, we were basically diagnosed and airlifted the next morning. There was a huge electrical storm that was happening over Sydney where my daughter was meant to be flown to. So we had to wait that very anxious night before we could be flown out. And I mean, they really are earth angels in themselves, the care flight team, because that plane had lightning hitting it and we were dropping in and out, meters at a time. And when they got there, one of the nurses had said to me, the specialist nurse, that's probably one of the worst trips we've had. So, even to get to that hospital, and then you're so disorientated at that point because you've been nights without sleep with such a sick baby. But we were given less than a 5% chance of her survival. In fact, the first night we were there, we were told most likely she wouldn't make it through the night. But in regards to those experiences, I had a priest that was given to me. I was up in intensive care. I really was disorientated. My then husband was driving from country New South Wales 6 hours away. So I was here solo with this baby, and I didn't realise it at the time, but the room I was in was one of the few rooms that wasn't open, and I had a nurse assigned to me. That's how serious it was. But we had a priest that was called around, and he was going to give last rites, and I refused them because at that point I was busy, thinking, well, she's still fighting, so I'm still going to fight. And I just got this calling to go down and look for a miracle. I thought, no one's going to help me here. The staff are acting as if it's a matter of time. And I felt this desperation as only a mother can feel when you're doing absolutely everything you can. So I literally, and I did apologise at the time, but I lifted the telephone book from the hallway, went through the yellow pages, and I was looking for healing. I can't even remember, I was searching prayers or healing miracles. And then this name, it was like everything else blurred, and a name lifted off the page. And I rang that first number and I said, I'm looking for a miracle. And the fellow who answered on the other side said, I know exactly who you need to speak to. I'll get Father Tony now. And that was Father Tony O'Brien, and he was actually in the Randwick Children's Hospital, which I didn't realise was literally across the road, church rather, and it was literally across the road from the hospital. So he said, I'll be there in a couple of minutes.
Wow.
And that gentleman had just arrived in Australia working as a missionary in Papua New Guinea. And he had been involved in some very powerful healings, which I learnt later on. I didn't know at the time. But if you've ever felt someone's aura and that magnitude of their presence, it was like we would talk about the Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa, that movement of their spiritual nature floods the space.
Yeah.
When he turned up at intensive care, I knew immediately it was Father Tony O'Brien, and he was just wearing not priest clothes as you would expect, just a football sort of Guernsey and pants and sneakers, and came in. But I literally felt like I'd known him forever, and I immediately came to him and hugged him. And we knew that we were each other's person, even though there was all other people in this open floor in intensive care. And of course, he did a very special prayers, and in my faith system, the laying of hands. Some listeners may have heard of that, faith healing.
Yeah.
But I actually remember thinking that the room was full of people at the time. And I'd asked, where did everyone go? And my then husband had said to me, well, there was only Father Tony and yourself and the nurse and myself there. But I thought it was full in that room. And there was lots of things that happened as a result. Immediately her oxygen saturations went up. Her heart started to, which was really, really thick at the time. Yeah. it started to regulate more,
Yeah.
and lots of strange things happened. You know, medicine that was meant to be put in by the oncology team 2 hours later, 6 pumps wouldn't work. They would not put the chemo through.
Wow.
Um, and they had been checked and electrical tagged the week before.
Wow.
So one of the nurses looked at each other and said, I don't think we're meant to put this in and give it to her right now. And they went downstairs and then came back a few hours later. And I can't help but feel that wasn't allowed to, because the heart at that time was working so hard with the thickness of the platelets and the clotting factor. So there was so many of those experiences, Paul, that I witnessed. And I wasn't alone with that. There was lots of other parents that witnessed the lights down the hallway, the toys that would play, it was almost like someone was in the playroom playing at about 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Of course,
That's
there
amazing.
was no one there.
That is really beautiful and very moving, and a very. I mean, there's so many questions I want to ask off of that. And in terms of, did you have a faith belief system before this happened? Did it just?
I think any experience like this will test your faith, really. When you're thrust into a situation where there are children that are suffering, that, you know, as a parent, sometimes you're asked to hold your child tight and firm while you know you're giving them something that's going to make them sicker than they already are. So it's a very heightened experience to be in that. And part of you can't help when you're surrounded by children suffering, or how can there be a God if he lets this happen?
Yeah.
But I will say to you that I lent on my faith. I could have at one point abandoned that, because there was a pivotal moment when I was told and taken aside that she wasn't coming through. We were more or less told she wasn't going to make it, and that we could perhaps prolong her time. Less than 5% chance survival, even if she did beyond 12 months. And they gave us, it just got worse and worse. And I just adamantly did not believe what they said. Now, whether that's my stubbornness, those that know me probably attest to that, but I just didn't believe them. You know, I remember being told in intensive care, don't give your child the bottle because she won't be able to cope with it. And I said, she's hungry and she's crying. She hasn't eaten for 24 hours. So I snuck the bottle in, and she guzzled the whole thing, and I snuck some more in, and she started to pick up. So I did lots of things probably, and I think a lot of parents did at the time, following that own instinctual nature that prompted you. And we can talk about the voice within, but when you're praying and you really don't have anything but the desire that you have within your heart to save your child, you pray with such a fervor. It's almost like there were so many moments. Those of listening might understand if anyone's in an oncology ward, well, particularly here in Australia, if your oxygen stats drop down from 94 to 92 and consistently stay below, well, you're rushed off to intensive care.
Yeah.
And there was a belief system, if that happened, that you weren't coming back again, because a lot of the kidneys of the children were compromised for those, you know, continuous rounds of chemotherapy. So you tried to avoid that at all costs. But I remember my daughter was in that situation, and she was quite she was unconscious, but she wasn't as responsive, and her oxygen stats were dropping. And they called for the intensive care team. Now, we were in a room at that time that had its own lock and its own air. It was the infectious ward that was part of the oncology ward, just upstairs from that. And I rather cheekily locked the door and wouldn't let them in. And there was a phone sort of intercom. And I said, just give me some more time. Not now. So I did what I'd always done, and was praying and imagining that all the prayers, whether they believed in a God or not, all the good intentions, I called that in and pulled that in through into my heart space. And I would literally imagine it flowing, those prayers going up to heaven and then flowing back through my arms. And I would watch as I did that, and the oxygen stats would come back up and up. And I repeatedly did that. Now, you can say it's a coincidence, but I've tested that a number of times when that happened, and every time that was the case. So that was my experience. And we avoided intensive care, but we get those moment sometimes too. I know in the bone marrow transplant room, because at 12 months she had to have a transplant, and that's where they take the child to the point of death, Paul, with such
Wow.
intense chemo. We were so fortunate that her one biological sibling, then four, Benjamin, was a perfect match. So they look at markers on the DNA, and for them to engraft bone marrow, it has to be a 4 or 5 at least out of 10 for the body not to reject it immediately. And we were 10 out of 10. The only difference is that my son's blood was showing it was male blood, and my daughter's was female blood. So that in itself was a little miracle in itself, because that information was given to me on the day of Mary MacKillock's feast day. And we had been praying to Mary MacKillop with a shroud. She's one of the Australian saints. I don't know if you've heard of her, Paul.
No, not in the UK. I'm sorry for being ignorant on that one.
That's all right. But she's actually been credited and recognised by the Catholic Church for being involved in, end of life cases where medical intervention is no longer possible.
Yeah.
Or going home to die. And she was a saint that was canonised in, I think, the late 1800s here in Australia. But there's, I'm just trying to think of what they call it. It was based upon the Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Joseph. But they're in North Sydney. And we'd been, for the one day we got out of hospital, we'd been to there. And here am I still wanting that miracle. Less than 5%. What are you going to do on your day off? You don't take your child to the park. You go, right.
Yeah.
This is where we're going. But she was in a pram then, and she was all hooked up with the nasal prongs and whatnot. But she broke free when I let her out of the pram, and she climbed right up to where she was interned, which behind the ropes, like it was a no-no. And every time I tried to get her off, she would be screaming, and I'd have to put her back on and she'd stop screaming. Now, coincidence, I don't know. But those sisters there that are retired continue to pray for her throughout her treatment. And when we heard that Benjamin, basically our only shot, but even holding on to her for longer, was a perfect match, it was the feast day of St. Mary MacKillop.
Wow. Wow. So, power of prayer. Getting the power of prayer right, creating a boundary. But with healing, there is this power when, like you said, with the intention, it's so powerful. It's got so much meaning to it. It seems to have a power all of its own.
It does. And so it's interesting you're even putting it that way, because if we look at the law of attraction, that's the belief that one manifests that, belief system that it will occur, imagine it, like attracts like.
Yeah.
But with prayer, you're having that same allowing, that gratitude and expectation, and that letting go, but it's believing in a power beyond oneself, which I can attest to. Being in that situation in a hospital, I'd much rather lean and hand that responsibility on than believe it was sort of up to me. I believe we're part of that channel, when the heart is open, the way is clear. And that is the truth. It's with that openness of heart. And you'll feel a prayer that's powerful, and you would have experienced this, Paul. Words that come out, spontaneous words, when you're in that power, when you're in that sacred flow, will literally lift your soul and your spirit. You'll feel like you're floating on air.
Yeah.
Totally. And there's definitely a power in that. And it's felt in heaven. I know it is. And I believe every prayer that we say, even for those as they pass over, is felt in heaven as they arrive. Almost like little bursts of love as they welcome their way in.
I agree. And when we interviewed a lady called Elisa Beaver, who did the instrumental transcommunication, she asked a question, and this little girl had passed over, had come back and said, prayers are felt in heaven. She recorded that statement. It's just, I truly believe that.
Well, I've actually written a lovely piece, and it was very spirit inspired, but it was a little, actually a young fellow here locally that was in my son's class, and he went through the cancer journey. and unfortunately didn't complete that journey as Millie had been fortunate enough to. But, in explanation of that, I was asked then to go up to the school and I bought balloons, balloons of love. And I will put that into a children's book because it's a very powerful explanation of the power of prayer and what it can do, because children are quite confused by the passing of a classmate at that age.
Yeah.
Why didn't God save them? All those sort of big questions and addressing that. But, the love they feel, that love, every droplet of love that we have and feel is not lost. It's felt in heaven.
Yeah.
It's like, we talk about choirs of angels, but it's literally in our earthly form, almost like harps, playing in heaven, that it resonates, it vibrates and touches them.
It's an inspiration to me. I mean, from my understanding, trying to love here is a really difficult aspect of the human experience. But once we step into that, apparently it is supposed to, like you said, radiate out throughout the ethers into the spirit. It's so much more powerful, which I'm told is why our prayers are so powerful when we pray for someone.
Absolutely. And I think that's the hardest thing, though, is when someone's going through that grief and that loss of a loved one, is that to feel that love is an ache. But I always say, the tears are your salve. Not only are they healing for you, but they're felt in the spirit world, but they're not sad tears. They're tears of love. They actually hold the vortex, the energy and the vibration, or the purity of the felt emotion and the reverence that you hold for them. So it's a little bit different in the spirit world. So I always say, let the tears go. Don't swallow them down. Let them go. It's a gift in the spirit world. And it's really, really powerful to help us here in this very grounded 3D reality heal from, move through, and continue to honor their life by the felt emotion. We can't deny love. It doesn't turn off like a tap just because we can't see them in that moment. And I think that continued loving is, I was doing a reading the other day, and this just reminds me of a mother who had lost a son. And it was many years ago now. And when I was doing the reading, he came through for a friend, and he'd only had the birthday, which I mentioned the week before, but I felt the mother's love, and I felt his love and his need to comfort the mother, to let her know that he knew what she was doing every birthday, every night. So it's felt and known in the spirit world. So it's not that we want everyone to stay in these states of grief, but don't judge it. It's your own personal journey, and it's not something that, is seen as well, I need to stop crying. They wouldn't want me upset. The love is felt. The tears may fall, but the love is felt.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really important. The two aspects there I wanted to touch on. One, how do you manage your emotion as a medium to separate yourself away from that? Do you have certain boundaries that you bring in afterwards? Because you've mentioned, say if you do 2 or 3 meetings a day and you're having that experience with loved ones and feeling their love, how do you manage that, if you don't mind me asking?
I used to get moved, and I still get touched, but not in the way where I lose my emotional control. Well, having said that, every now and then there'll be that one reading that grabs you out of nowhere when you least expect it. But I kind of surrendered more to the fact that I wasn't responsible for what was coming through. I was just telling the story. I was the storyteller, the narrator. And so I just took a back seat and kind of let spirit more step in and control the reading. So it became less about me grabbing for evidence and information, and more of the exchange and the natural flow started to take place. And that's when I really lost the need to feel everything, and be able to give the information with sensitivity and the expression and the felt emotion. I'm an empath. I'm very sensitive. Clairsentience is very dominant with me. So I naturally feel into stories and people. I mean, I can't even watch the news. I'll have tears coming. I just can't. I get moved by things easily. But when I put my medium cap on, it's like the spirit world comes in now. and they put this blanket of protection over me to get in and do, because they want sensitive souls doing this work. They
Okay.
want the person that feels all the feelings that perhaps didn't feel like they fitted in because they were too sensitive or felt too much,
Yeah.
or the black sheep, so to speak. But literally, the spirit will support you and build up this sort of Teflon coat. You start to develop more of this, I'm here to do the work for spirit. There's that reverence and sacredness, and you kind of lose the ego state. It becomes less about, oh, I did a great reading. Well, I think I did a great service for the spirit world.
Absolutely.
I think
100%.
that's just with time, though, Paul.
Yeah.
Not when you're starting out. You're just climbing that mountain. You're trying to get that piece of evidence, and you want to make sure that the family member takes them and understands, because you do still feel that need in the spirit world, but then it becomes less of that and more of this natural exchange that starts to take place.
I, and I'm pretty sure some people at home could resonate with my feelings. I struggled with the responsibility of that, the pressure of bringing through their loved ones and bringing the right message, or saying the right thing, connecting with that person, and the vulnerability is what I'm trying to say, Dayna. And I'm a guy, and I had to get into that space. And I'd say to people, sensitivity isn't a weakness. There is an element of surrender. I don't know. I mean, your experience is going to be different to mine, but for me, it was the vulnerability of that aspect of it, if that makes sense.
Well, it is, and of course, as we bring the stories through of those that have passed over and they're very real, felt in the moment experiences, we're bringing through their vulnerabilities, we're bringing through their experiences, so we're going to be moved in that way as well. So we can't sit there like poker face, regurgitating information. We're moving with it. We're moving with that flow. And it's almost like, as they draw close, you start to feel, become and be, and just allow. And it's in that surrender state that, sometimes you have those really beautiful readings, which you feel almost blessed to be a part of.
Absolutely. And I went for a period recently where I started to get over emotional with I was taking on too much, but and it was making me sad and upset, but spirit, I think, they learn to adapt with our energy and who we are as people as well. It's not just a one-way thing. We don't have to do all the work. Well, it's good to do all the work. Let me take that back. But they also work with us. And I've noticed now my messages are coming through. There's a lot of joy and excitement, and it's really lifting me up when I connect to that. Their excitement to connect with their loved ones.
That's beautiful, Paul. And I'm wondering too, because as you were saying that, I kind of went to, we can say it's the readings that make us vulnerable and make us weepy, but I actually think that we get healing when we deliver through the stories of others, and where there's parts of self that didn't allow ourselves to feel the enormity of an event or allow ourselves the grief. Sometimes that will be experienced as we're on that journey through mediumship. And we can think at the time that we're overwhelmed, we're being moved, but the sadness was already within.
Yeah.
It's just the story of those in spirit becomes the vehicle to allow it to be felt.
Yeah.
That's just a different way of looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And coming back to talking about miracles and mystical experiences, I mean, we don't necessarily talk about that so much, and it's not something that we've really covered on Spiritual Talk, but it's, miracles in themselves. There's daily miracles that occur, but we tend to shut them down. I can think of 4 or 5 off the top of my head. I mean, my own experience, I was expecting to be really ill for a very long time, and to be told that the tumor had crystallized was, for me, it was a miracle, because I had a chance for a second life. So people experience them all the time. Why don't we embrace the more mystical side of it, is what I'm trying to say.
Look, I think that, I think you're exactly right. It's as natural as, normal as the air we breathe, basically. They're happening all around us. And I think sometimes people are stupefied in the moment. Did that really just happen? Like, they'll question, they're dumbfounded because it can't be explained in that moment. or the outcome is so far removed from what was expected. There's almost that sort of silence around it. And then, of course, people feel that they may be judged for sharing it because we're brought up in this community. We're very science orientated. Prove it, prove it, prove it through the laws of science, which in itself is quite young. And miracles have been happening for centuries. And then, of course, looking at faith as being something that people utilised in order to, control the masses, or perhaps, there's all different theories around why different religions have been started or created throughout the world. And so I think the educated among us start to look sometimes down the nose on those that have a faith or a spiritual belief. Like, you believe there's a man up in the cloud there, do you? Yeah. And there is that sort of level of skepticism about having a faith beyond ourselves. But I think when you get those evidential things in front of you that happen that even you're perplexed by, you have to sit up and listen. And, most of the people, I think there was some, it was not an interview, but rather a survey in the States about how many people believed in that life continued on, and how many people believed in angels. And it was like 2/3 of the population said yes. I mean, they're astounding numbers. But no one, because it was anonymous, no one owns it. Very few of us that put our name to it and that bear witness to what we've experienced. Yours is profound, Paul, so you have no problems with expressing the gratitude of that, as do I. I was in the bone marrow transplant room at that right crucial moment between my child taking on my son's bone marrow or not making it. It was that crucial hour, and it happened about 1 or 2 in the morning. And I had her in my arms, and there was about 10 different pumps that were happening and going all the time. And normally they had to be in the bed, but of course I didn't do protocol. That's very much my nature to buck the system. Because I thought if she's not going to make it, she needs to be in my arms. And I was praying that whole time. There was this sound that happened, and this is where I've got no problems professing, because I saw it with my own eyes, and I smelt, it was iridescent, bright white. It sounded like a crack of electricity, like a crackle, and then it was just the brightest white light sort of filled the room, and I felt this, I can't even describe the feeling of peace that just descended like liquid silk, just running through every fibre of my being. And it was like sort of things felt like they slowed down, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Then it was followed by the most beautiful smell of roses that I have ever smelt in my entire life, like a rose that lingers. And as I say that, it did linger, because a nurse, after this experience had happened, and I was, of course, you don't even realise, but your face is pouring tears, because the human vessel can't hold that field of energy as it moves through it. It can't help but move you. But I had a nurse, interesting, who was actually a Buddhist nurse, who came in 15 minutes later, and after this experience was over, and I was just very quiet, still praying, and moved. And she'd said to me, "Oh, my goodness, the beautiful smell." And I said, "You smell it too." And I said, "The smell of roses?" And she said, "Yes." She patted her and she said, "Millie's going to be okay." So, there's just these things that happen. Now, whether that was, someone might like to say, well, you're under stress, your daughters could pass at any moment. Do you fabricate that in the subconscious? I had a nurse come in and validate my experience.
Yeah, I've got tingles all over my head. I can feel that. Sometimes people talk about getting tingles, or the ring of truth, they call it. Tingles going up and down the spine. I can really feel the energy and the power of your voice and that experience. Now, I had something similar, but I assumed it was my nan, because she loved roses and she was scattered on a rose garden. So, and I had it wasn't a healing journey. It was a connection I had to the spirit world, and I smelled this fabulous smell of roses. So I just assumed it was my nan. I'm now starting to doubt myself. It could have been something else.
Well, Paul, I can only say that I attribute that to Mary, Mother Mary, because when I was 12, I wrote a poem that ended up winning some prize throughout the state amongst different, it was at the school I was at, and it was called Mary, the Mother of Peace. And it was a beautiful rose. And I spoke about that. So whether that was utilised, so I would attribute it or recognise that to her. But I think there has been accounts of people feeling the presence of Mother Mary and the smell of roses. But that was not something at the time that I put two and two together. It was just in that moment experience. And it just, I always feel like there's no other way to describe it other than divine grace. It's an out of worldly experience to feel something so deeply, but then to feel everything all at the same time.
It's like a hallelujah moment.
It is, and it's hard to describe it because there were so many moving parts happening all at once, culminating in this felt experience.
Yeah. I've not had anything as profound as that, but I've had a couple of hallelujah moments where I've felt that divine presence and grace, and it's a beautiful experience. Beautiful experience. Thank you for sharing that. That's very moving and very personal. And I really appreciate you sharing it. And I know a lot of the viewers have their own experiences. Can we come back to how you manage yourself energetically? Do you have a preparation before you start work, or?
You know, it's funny how we create these rituals, isn't it?
Yeah.
In order to allude to the fact that we're beginning work soon. I used to have certain little prayers that I would say. Now it's just I literally move my mind and I don't even think I say the words. I surrender to serve. It's literally like that. I surrender to serve. And then we just go now. I don't do I used to do the clearing of the chakras, and I did all these fancy, which no doubt has that effect on the energetic vibration, and we're aligning with a vibration that's so much higher. So we need to have that frequency and flow. But the power of the mind, when you have that belief and faith that you will connect, it starts to rely less on the rituals and just the surrender.
I remember I was covering a demonstration for the lovely Sue Hind, who wasn't very well, and I was late, there was traffic, worst possible preparation scenario you can imagine. And do you know what? I literally said a prayer on the way in as I was driving, parked up, got in. I felt like I slid across to where I stood for the demonstration, and it was absolutely fine. So it kind of blew out all my theories of prayer and balance, and it's just like, I've arrived, I'm here, and I just went from there. So,
but it's a surrender to that power, and when you've been doing that practice of sitting in the power too, as soon as you move that mind to surrender into that space, it's almost like you're in. You're not in, but you're ready to work. And sometimes that can be difficult and challenging. Like, we've all got personal lives and stuff that happens, and people face work sometimes, downtown serving you across the counter, and they're trying to be happy and chirpy because they're doing retail and they're going through a dreadful time. Well, it's kind of exaggerated sometimes when you're feeling into the stories of others if you're having a little bit of a hardship yourself. But it really is that when you have the belief in the work that you do, and after a period of time, you see the changes that have happened. See, I do healing work, and I've worked with people purely with modalities. Then I combined modalities, and then I combined the intuitive work with that, and then I intermingled a lot that happened with the healings, and to see that sort of soul light up, and you can literally feel things lift. Stories, belief systems, old outdated things. It's like a freedom. And I think that spiritual healing with that is that it allows them to fast track healing more than any modality that I'd ever learnt, really. And it gives them something that the mental health system can't give them. I have a lot of people that see me that work in mental health, right from the top end to the grassroots level. That spiritual nourishment is something that clinical words can't always heal or shift the perspective or lighten their load.
Yeah.
It's when you're working with spirit and they give you those words in that moment, specifically for that person to reach and touch them. Sometimes you pull them out of the trenches. You know, I've done I had an experience there for over 2 years. I had a lot of people that had suicidal ideation. So I really was working at that end. So mediumship, the psychic work, yes, but it was soul work. I'm not going to say soul rescue, but you really have to surrender with faith and trust when you're dealing with someone so fragile at that
Yeah.
tail end of, you know, do I stay, do I go? So you've got some work to do, and you've got to roll your sleeves up and trust more than ever that
You,
what comes out your mouth.
yeah, and you're a very advanced medium, but and Spirit have clearly worked with you in different ways to kind of give you those different aspects of your work, and healing is always at the center of that work, and I can tell that with you. But I want to go back to the little devil on the shoulder called doubt. How did you deal
Yes,
with that in the early days?
the nemesis.
Mm, yeah,
Doubt. How did I deal with it? Good question, Paul. And I had plenty of that doubt initially, because some days you do these great connections and the next day you think, I know nothing, I can't do this at all. And you get the
yeah,
wobbly knees, the shaky heart, and be afraid to speak up.
yeah,
But, you know, it's really, I think, you know, that when you give yourself permission to say, well, this is just when you're learning, this is just an experiment.
yeah,
You know, it doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong. The more I use the muscle, the more spirit works with me. And then you get the felt sense of what no feels like in the body. You get the felt sense of what yes feels like in the body. And you just learn to trust the body is a tuning fork then. So you need the nose. You need
yeah,
to know going off track. You need that sensitivity within energetically. When you've gone, your monkey mind's gotten involved and you've moved in a different direction, you think, oh, that just doesn't feel right. And you move your mind back to the middle and do the work again. So yeah, I had definitely moments of doubt, and looking at people that were advanced and you're starting out and they do this amazing connection when you're sitting in a circle and you're like, oh, I'm too afraid to give what I've got.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, he like bananas, or, you know, and it's really simple information, but you've got the advanced medium pouring out the life story, the personality, you know, all those intricate little details of the fabric of their life. So it's going to be very daunting. And you will sit in circles when you've got beginner mediums working alongside intermediate mediums. And then, of course, you've got the intermediate mediums that touch into the advanced mediumship. So you're always going to feel that, you know, the worst thing you can do is compare yourself to others, because
yeah,
you need to understand that spirit will literally use every experience you've ever had, the
yeah,
good and the bad, and
yeah.
your unique soul is required, and your unique experiences are required, and spirit will work with you. And they have a way. You can't fast track this, because we all want to be the advanced medium. We all want to get it right. No one likes to be wrong. We get that fear of, oh, I'm going to look silly. Looks like I can't do it at all.
Yeah.
It's you know, it's the getting up again. It's the falling down and the getting up again, because that says to the spirit world, my heart's pure, my heart's open. I
Yeah,
have that desire to serve, and they will work with you
absolutely.
and help you go that extra mile.
So I want to come back to the mystical stories because, like I said earlier, we don't necessarily do much of the mystical stories. Have you found any kind of connection with angels? Now, angels, for some people, you know, they don't have that experience. Do you have anything angelic that you've experienced in your life?
Okay, interesting that you actually mentioned angels, because when my daughter was ill, now remember she was a baby, when she was 3 and she didn't have any access to anything in regards to this, we were going to see Father Tony in Sydney to give, you know, to visit him.
Yeah.
She drew a picture of a massive, on butcher paper, of an angel and how big, and feathers, and every feather, she was only three and a half, had individual coloured feathers.
Wow.
And she said, that's the person who healed me. So you can,
Wow.
that's the man who healed me. So you can say it's out of the mouth of babes. No one puts that into their mouth. No one plants that idea. She had little to no memory of the hospital visit, other than the fact every time she smelled hospital smells, she would panic. But she didn't have a lot of that memory being as a baby. But there's so many different experiences you hear. I know with 9/11 too, lots of people having angels sit with them until help arrived, or talk with them, or lead them through ways out. And there's hundreds of those experiences. I know here in Australia there was I think it was I think I read it growing up actually in a magazine, and I think they named it for the article like the bush angel, but there was a boy that was lost somewhere in Queensland in a remote area, and he spoke about a silvery bright lady all in white that held him by the hand and stayed with him, was telling him it's okay, help's coming soon. And he was found in an area that they couldn't believe they found him. So, but people have all those experiences of hands. I think here in Australia we had that terrible down in, I'm just trying to think of what it was called, but there was a fellow who went on a shooting rampage here down in Tasmania at one of the tourist places where an old prison, original penal prison was here. And there was a number of accounts of different people saying they felt almost like a loving but firm push to the ground prior to the shower of pellets coming in their direction. So, I think sometimes that thing called divine timing, when it's not our time, I think spirit steps in sometimes and makes sure we're out of harm's way. I was talking to my sister. My brother had an experience falling asleep coming back from an out-of-town place and was going off the side of the road and with my then father alongside, falling asleep, and woke up to sort of an iridescent white hand move through his arm, and he could see it, iridescent white, and reefed the wheels as he woke up, and then he was back onto the road after he'd gone off. So there's lots of those experiences that people have.
Yeah, I can think of one. I was told a story about a gentleman that was in a Japanese prisoner of war camp, and there was 2 air raid shelters, and this was a very logical man. He was prisoner of war, going through a very difficult time in his life, and the air raid warning went off, and they had A or B, and as he was running towards A, this voice shouted at him so loudly, "B, now," and he went to B, and sadly a bomb dropped on A and killed everybody inside it.
Yeah.
So, and it profoundly changed him the rest of his life. Where did that voice come from? What was that? But it also opens your mind up. If you can have that experience and not shut it down, like you said earlier, we can tend to shut these experiences down. Like, did I just imagine that? Did that really happen? But if we're more open to it, I think it allows for more possibility of other things to come into your life.
I think you just naturally start to notice, become more aware, don't you? And with that awareness, it starts to grow like a muscle that you're actually looking for. You're reading between the lines. You're not just taking things at face value. Yeah. You're looking at how did that happen? The timing of that, multiple things had to align for that to happen at that exact moment that perhaps put you out of peril's way.
Yeah.
But I think too that voice isn't always just a voice of warning. I think, which is we hear a lot about. They're the accounts that we read, facing life and death situation and that hand or that person. But I think if we start to come to we arrive at the understanding that communication with, some people might call it your higher self. I tend to think that we all have a miracle worker assigned to us at birth. Our little miracle worker angel. And miracles aren't just health or life and death. Miracles are the things that shift and move people so that they expand and become all they're meant to be in this lifetime. Yeah. And sometimes we're a part of that story. Yeah. And it's our little movement from our miracle worker that uplifts someone that day. You have that random conversation with a stranger and you go out of your way and you think, gosh, okay, well, I'm a nice person, but why did I go to so much trouble then? Because your spirit is being moved and pushed because it may be that very day that person was deciding not to wake up tomorrow.
Yeah.
We all have those moments, I guess. Sorry, Paul, in answer to your question, I went off my tangent there.
Don't worry. Don't worry, don't worry. So, for me, I coming back to the angels again. I've got so many stories, and I'm sorry, guys, I do have a lot of stories. People tell me and share so many beautiful stories with me. And there was
You
another
would.
one
Absolutely.
similar to your experience, but her daughter was a lot older, and she was having open heart surgery. She was a child, but it was, obviously everyone was worried. It was, it was touch and go. And she walked out of a hospital, and there stood a 20-foot angel. Oh, it's really emotional. And looking at her, telling her it's going to be okay.
And there have been reports, we think these lovely little angel statues that are cute and fluffy.
Yeah.
Some of these angels have been reported to be quite, as you said, massive.
And powerful. I interviewed a lovely medium from Scotland called Clara, and she said she had experienced her mum was very poorly and she was staying at her mother's house, and an angel came to her one night, and she was so petrified she couldn't look over the blanket, so to speak. She was very aware of it, but there was such a power and presence with this angel. It frightened her. I mean, that's never been my experience. I've never been frightened by anything like that. But I guess the power of that can be quite frightening.
I think too, I think you touched on something important too. When people have experiences, they expect them to be fluffy and lovely
Yeah.
and light. But some of them are disconcerting. Some of them are a little bit spooky and the unexpected. So from that place, people are reluctant to talk about them as well because they're not sure what to think or feel about them sometimes. But I think it's really important that we do share and normalize these experiences because particularly as we're heading on the mediumship journey, we're going to have more of those experiences come towards us because as the sensitivity of the soul is heightened, you're naturally going to, it may be that your clairvoyant vision starts to increase and you actually start to see the spirit world, which has just recently started to happen for me. And I did see that as a child, but it kind of, things come and go with mediumship, don't they?
Absolutely.
And so that seems to be operating more clearly now. And I don't have any of the fear that I would have once had associated with it because the more we build our faith and our belief that what we're doing is sacred work and we know and feel when spirit is moving through us in that way, particularly when there's healing involved and most healings have that element, readings rather have that element of healing, we tend to lose that hesitation or the fear behind the work that we're doing. It's other people that may have an issue with the work that we're doing, but when we're working from that very heart-centered place, you feel it is a vocation, you feel it is an act of service, and it's less about, mediums do this for all different reasons, don't they, Paul? They might go on a grief journey or they want to reach their loved one. Equally, sometimes it's like they want to be seen, recognised, validated, from all those different places. But I think it's important when we do the work that not to forget that we've got real people in the spirit world, real people in front of us going through states of grief. And so we always have to return to that heart space, and I say in God we serve.
Yeah. Beautiful. Dayna, can we talk about you? Okay, can we ask you what's going on with you? What's coming up? I know you do a podcast as well. Can we mention all of that so people know
yes,
to find
lovely. I have a dear Canadian friend of mine, Marie Goncalves, and she has the Marie Goncalves podcast. I'm fortunate enough every now and then she invites me in to co-host, and between us, we get to find out about other mediums and those on the spiritual journey. So that's been a really wonderful, and it's really helping starting mediums as they're going out training, sort of removing the fear from what it is that you're experiencing, because when we're starting out, we've got so many questions, and you might attend a workshop, but then you want to go back and ask more questions. Yeah. So it's a great platform to really listen to those, really deep conversations, sometimes philosophical, sometimes from a teaching place. We've had lots of tutors on from the Arthur Findlay College, but equally we've got a well-rounded array of guests that come on that share their experiences. And I really think that it's important that, the spiritual journey is a freeway. It is not a two-way street. And there's many lanes that lead home, and we need to showcase and explore, and we need to keep questioning with that level-headed approach, because otherwise we limit what the truest expression of this work is. And we're really just at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, I will link, guys, your details of how people can find you, Dayna, and I'll put all that in the comments below. So check that out, guys. Also, we like to ask a final question on what we're not talking about that we should be in the spiritual community, or something you'd even like to change.
Something I'd like to change in the spiritual community. I think it would be that there's an understanding that after years of working in this field, that certain mentors have arrived at the place of absolute understanding. And if they bring, I just believe all mentors are still learning. We're all still learning. Yes. We're all still evolving. So I really encourage students to always understand that the mentor in front of you is giving you their personal experiences and their understanding to the best of their current knowledge base. But leave your mind open.
Yes.
Leave it open to explore and ingest and, take on different belief systems, rudiment over different things. Really take the time to explore all understandings, even from different cultural perspectives, because we're all tainted sometimes in our viewpoints, whether it was a religious upbringing or whatnot. We kind of have to come in with an open mind and to get to the truth of the matter. And that really sometimes is buried. And we have to dive down the rabbit hole sometimes. Very
wise words. Dayna Louise, we can't thank you enough for coming on Spiritual Talk. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, Paul. I've really enjoyed my time, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Guys, don't forget to subscribe and share. We'd love your comments as well. Let us know your feedback, and we'll see you again soon for another episode of Spiritual Talk.